If you're looking for something to do on a Sunday afternoon and are up for some hand-clapping music, a rousing sermon about the many ways we're destroying the environment, and calls to action on issues ranging from reducing the use of fossil fuels to protesting the genocide in Gaza to fighting gentrification of the East Village, then you might want to come down to the Earth Church on Avenue C and East 3rd Street. For 2 years, Reverend Billy Talon, an actor turned self-appointed preacher and environmentalist, and Savitri D., a musician, activist, and director of the Stop Shopping Choir, have been holding forth in a church service that encourages its followers not to just complain about the injustice they see happening in the world, but to take direct action against it. It's a church not quite like any other, and today they're here to tell us about their church, its mission, their current justice struggles, and how it all began. Welcome.
Thank you.
You know, I had the privilege of attending your Sunday church service recently, and I was taken by the vibe, which is I would describe as somewhere between a Broadway show and a revival. Tell me about your service and how it's different from other churches.
I think it is directed by an actual theater director, Savitri Durkee over here, Savi. That's one difference. But increasingly, churches have become directed. Lots of churches, like a lot of Christian churches, they have pacing, they have a professional band, they have professional lighting. So the theatricality is not, we're not all on our own with that. I'd say that it's the subject matter, it's finding ecstatic ritual in loving the earth.
So how did the Earth Church come to be?
Well, we started the Church of Stop Shopping more than 20 years ago, and that was a response really to what we saw as a wave of consumerism flooding every part of our lives. You know, the mandate to shop, the imperative, shop, you've got to shop, you've got to shop. It's just shopping, 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 and the sort of fundamentalism of that system as it came into us, you know, at the end of the 90s with globalization and this sort of like the Borg of the neoliberal economy descending on all of us. And suddenly all we had to do was shop. And so we were responding to that fundamentalism with a kind of ironic take with another kind of fundamentalism, which, you know, these televangelists are not as omnipresent as they used to be in our culture because of the siloing, really, of social media, right? Like, they're still there. There's still millions of people involved. It's just we don't have to see it on our aunt's TV in the kitchen as much, right? So, you know, Billy was responding to that imagery and that persona, you know, the right-wing preacher on TV. And we started out, it was quite satirical, you know, but eventually we realized that we shared values and we were gathered around our values and we were using the tools we had, which was performance, because we're all, you know, New Yorkers, and there's singers and actors and dancers and directors who, you know, found themselves without a kind of fellowship around our values and our beliefs. So that's the origin.
Billy, you have described yourself as a satirical preacher. What do you mean by that?
Well, the satire started draining away as the sincerity rose. Back in the day, when televangelists were more prominent in everyday life, well, then being satirical was like a Saturday Night Live bit. It was a basic comic trope in American society. But Savitri and I became more and more interested with our community in the crisis of the earth, which we kind of gradually went over to that point of view and that activism. And then, how can you be satirical about wanting to save your own life and the life of life around you and the earth? So sincerity became fascinating to us. I think it became more fascinating than irony.
Well, I mean, you can call it sincerity or you can call it meaning. I don't know. Sincerity has...
Sounds boring.
Yeah. Like, really? It just sounds sort of lame. I don't know.
If you
I'm a
mean
little
what
more
you
punk
say.
rock than that.
You do mean what you say.
Earthalluia.
If Joey Ramone was sincere, then I'm sincere. Okay.
Now, you both come from sort of performance backgrounds. Tell me about it, your backgrounds.
Oh, it was so long ago, Cheryl. So long ago. Yeah, I trained as a dancer and an actor, and I was very involved in the theater. And then, honestly, I just saw that the theater wasn't for everybody. I mean, I saw that the audiences were very, well, they were just white and middle class, upper class. And I just felt like, I live in New York. I want to be in New York. Why am I performing for this audience? I don't know. I just suddenly it didn't make any sense to me. So I went on the street.
Where you met him.
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much.
And your background, how did you start off?
I was a producer of performance art / theater in the Bay Area. And it influenced me. Some of the people I was producing, I fell in with them and learned from them. And especially Spalding Gray. It's a New York figure of note.
Right.
But B.D. Wong and Danny Glover performing his Langston Hughes evening. I produced people from all over the culture, and felt myself being pulled into being a storyteller myself.
And as you said, you started out with the whole anti-consumerism thing. I gather you kicked up a lot of dust in Walmart, Disney, Victoria's Secret, Starbucks.
Yes.
Okay. And then you gradually moved over to the environmental message.
We still go back to tune up.
Okay.
We go to Times Square, you know.
Okay.
We go into, especially J.P. Morgan Chase.
Oh, you do? Okay.
They put more fossil fuel. Some people say Citibank puts the most in, but those two banks are polluting and making Hurricane Helena, you know.
I mean, retail space remains the hallowed ground of our culture, you know, and it is the most charged space you can find. Like when Billy was talking about churches having producers and directors, I mean, you know, religion has always been like side by side with theater, right?
Yeah.
But the difference is that the stages don't matter. Like they're very, there's walls around them, there's ticket buying, there's all these coded cultural activity. But retail space, you walk into it, and that is the charged place in our culture. You walk near a cash register, watch out. Everyone freaks out. There's all this energy. It's the high altar, you know. So we remain very interested in that theatrically and ritually, you know, what those spaces give to us, what we can say there.
Yeah. The Stop Shopping Choir, which is really fantastic. It has a kind of gospel vibe.
Yeah.
But it's not all like the religious gospel. There's a sort of Broadway theatricality to it. Who are they?
Wow. Well, they are all of us. I mean, it's a subway car. They're scientists, they're teachers, they're performers, they're artists, they're dog walkers. I mean, they're from, at one time or another, we've had every continent on that stage. People they're immigrants, first generation.
Asylum seekers from West Africa.
I think a lot of times there are people who have a feeling about something, like something's wrong, or they feel compromised in the culture the way many of us do. We wake up and think, I didn't consent to this, you know, and they sing. So then you want to sing with other people who sing.
Right.
You know.
I met one choir member who said, I think she said she had been a member of the choir for something like 30 years. I mean, a long time.
30 years.
Feels like
Must
30 years.
feel like 30 years. I hope it isn't 30 years.
A long time. And you write a lot of the songs.
I do.
Give me an example of some of the lyrics.
I mean, one of my favorite songs that we're singing right now is called The Now Bird. And the Now Bird just tells a simple story of a bird. A bird fell down from the sky into my hand, my outstretched hand. Why have you come, bird? What do you need? Are you the Now Bird? what have you seen? And the bird says, I lived in a forest. I lived in a tree. I lived in a forest. I lived in a tree. And a tree is the opposite of a cop. And this is a song written in response to Cop City and the murder of Tortuguita, who was killed by police in his tent resisting Cop City. It's also a song we sing about the East River Park, where so many trees are threatened. And it's kind of a way of us telling this story, like what is meaningful, what is powerful in our society, in our culture, you know. And for us, the trees, you know, the great sentinels of our lives, right? Who stand still and witness all and have a knowledge of history that we'll never have because they've lived so long. You know, they just cut them down. And yet, you know, police, so that oppositional force, I don't know, that's one of my favorite songs right now.
This is a church, in terms of your members now, it's a church for social activists of all kinds. Is that essentially what it is?
Absolutely. I mean, right now, protest and just ways to change society from outside institutions. Just make it general like that. We are suppressed more than ever. The First Amendment's under attack. So we sang that song when we were touring with Neil Young this spring, and Tortuguita's mother, Belkris Manuel, was right there in the audience. She came up and hugged us.
How'd you get hooked up with Neil Young? How did that happen?
We've been singing about the earth for like a dozen years. Since before Occupy Wall Street, we were already environmentalists. We sang to tree sitters up in old redwood trees in California.
That was like 2006.
Well, that was way back. So it was always overlapping with the Stop Shopping, because most of the plastics and you know, most of the pollutants that come into our environment come from some form of consumerism. So
and corporations.
And
Don't let them off the hook. Yeah.
Oh, they're nice people.
They're not people.
Wow. Go for it, baby. So yeah. So we had a moment of when Manuel Terran's mother was there, and then in that same audience there were conservative people who booed us, as I
Police,
recall.
yeah.
So we were there with people opposing Cop City, and we were there who were building it, and it suddenly wasn't art anymore. It was very. We weren't referring to something outside of the building.
Right.
I mean, Neil Young's a great example of organizing around values, you know, like we have a relationship with him because we share political positions and earth justice positions.
In fact, you have been quoted as saying one of your goals is to integrate our deeply held beliefs with action of any kind.
Yeah. Yeah.
You said that?
Yeah, but you know, it's an interesting time, Cheryl, because I feel like people aren't really even very sure of what their beliefs are. I think that we're quite divorced from our beliefs. You know, I've been asking people, well, what do you believe? And even the question is so foreign to people, like the permission to have beliefs. We're so compromised and sort of dictated to by social media and advertising and marketing, and sort of told what to think, what to believe, that I think a lot of times we don't even give ourselves permission to ask ourselves, like, what do you believe? What is a deeply held belief? I mean, it's a tricky time to get deep with oneself about beliefs.
Billy, you used the phrase that we're living in a proto-apocalypse. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think I should update that phrase. I think we're approaching the app at the beginning of an apocalypse. We're getting that app. Hurricane Otis and Hurricane Beryl coming from the Pacific into Acapulco and up those mountains there, and then Beryl came across the Grenadines and Jamaica towards Yucatan. They were both 200-mile-an-hour windstorms. And scientists were saying that they became that amazing. Can you imagine a piece of debris flying by your head at that speed? It's hard to. And then Hurricane Helena, right now, the heat waves, thousands of people, especially in the global south, but in 2023, 47,000 people in Europe. It's going up into the temperate areas now, the heat waves. So we have treated natural disasters as unique events that they're reported separately as discrete events that start, peak, and stop, and there they are. You put a frame around them, it's one news item. That's not anymore the case. Now they're overlapping.
Okay.
Now we're having the Earth is in charge, and the Earth has got things happening. We can feel the incidents, we can feel the rhythm is changing. But in 2023 and 2024, these 2 years, the director of NASA wrote a public letter in which he confessed that scientists, climate scientists, don't know why it's become so hot so fast. They don't know the reason. You can call it all climate change if you want to, but they had to throw away their computer models. They've always been able to kind of estimate what was going to happen in 6 months. They can't anymore.
Because it's going so fast.
It's just all record-breaking.
So you're saying we really are in the middle of this kind of environmental apocalypse. We're in the middle of it.
This is the first step of the sixth extinction.
Okay. Some of the other issues that you've been talking about, or at least we're talking about when I was there, gentrification of the East Village is one of your concerns. Tell me what's going on there that you don't like.
Well, I mean, it's gentrification everywhere, right? When people talk about the housing crisis, is that gentrification? I think it is. You know, that's the commodification of where we live, right? Basically, so that's happening on the Lower East Side. That's happening in East New York. That's happening in the Bronx. That's happening in suburban Atlanta. Like, we are people trying to live our lives, you know, in whatever way we can, and the things that allow us to do that are out of reach for most of us, right? I see that as gentrification, right? That is the monoculture, and the monoculture is increasingly expensive to be part of. So we are in the Lower East Side, that's where we work. We live in Brooklyn, but you know, that's an old story on the Lower East Side, Alphabet City, the gentrification there. And I'm amazed and proud of that neighborhood for holding on to what it has held on to, you know.
What's the story with East River Park? You talked about that a lot.
Well, it looks like just straightforward corruption. De Blasio rejected a 3 years in development community plan. The community boards, hiring experts from around the world. It took 3 years. They had a way of saving East River Park. You know what I'm talking about? It's just between the FDR and the East River, between Brooklyn Bridge on the south and Bed-Stuy, the Peter Cooper on the north.
Okay.
Stuytown, yeah.
Stuytown, it's about 23 blocks. The East River was hit hard by Hurricane Superstorm Sandy, but so were other places in the area. But that is surrounded by people with relatively less power. NYCHA housing is along the edge of this. It's shaped like Chile. It's long and narrow between the East River and the FDR. It has 1,000 trees, or it had 1,000 trees. They've cut down 550 of the trees now. These are mature trees. And
this was in order to build a
seawall, seawall to protect the village area from a sea surge from a future Hurricane Sandy. However, it doesn't pass the nonsense test because it's just that 23 blocks. So the water can go around it, or it can go to Brooklyn, or it can go to some other part of most of Manhattan is low to the sea. I'd say the bottom 1/3 of Manhattan is at sea level. So that begs the question, how do you keep the sea out if it keeps rising? It will keep rising. It is rising. And that is a massive Army Corps of Engineers plan to put a big armadillo casing
Like a fortress.
around past Chelsea on the west side, all the way down around the ferry building, all the way up to the United Nations or something. It's gonna have this seawall. Well,
No.
nobody's legislated that. It's just a kind of a pie in the sky idea that the Army Corps is having, and they're often wrong in their estimations of what
Well,
should
and
be
they
done.
never ask the earth. They never say, Earth, well, how would you deal with a flood? You know, or
Right.
they never look to the ways that water and land interact in a healthy way, right? Oh, guess what? Some grasses are very porous. Oh, guess what? Like hill with soil on it, that absorbs water. What are the ways that the earth is already doing this? And let's enhance that. Let's not build a man-made fortress that we know these things fail. They always fail. They don't work.
And meanwhile, a lot of trees have been sacrificed and a lot of green space, and that's your.
It's the green space for
Yes.
20,000 children who live
Yeah.
in the NYCHA housing along the Reese houses, the Baruch houses. They're along that 23 blocks.
With some of the highest asthma rates in the country.
The immigrant crisis has also been one of your
Yes.
concerns. And you have a lot of immigrants from the neighborhood who come to the church for services. Tell me.
Some of them are in the choir. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure New Yorkers will remember last winter, the December and January 23, 24, how many people were coming into the city, you know, weaponized, politicized from Texas on buses, and we're standing in the cold waiting for shelter, and we just opened our doors and said, come inside, because it was freezing and they were unprepared. Many of them have never seen a winter.
Right.
And a group of neighbors rose up to provide care for them, the East Village Neighbors Who Care. And so since that time, our space, the Earth Church, has been a warming center and then a cooling center and a site for English classes and, you know, some food and just care, you know.
Right.
It's like a safe place to be
Right.
while you're waiting for shelter or tickets or whatever.
Billy, you have described the Earth Church experience as, quote, an experiment that is 2 years old. What have you learned from that experiment?
I've learned that different areas of the way that we relate to each other as people, in conversations, in waving, in singing, all the kinds of expression that you can think of, that they all fit into a kind of love of the earth, ritual hour of time together. We haven't felt the limits of what we can do. We go out on every limb, you know. It's comedy. We're all crying. It's children and
you all
dogs.
seem to have a great time.
Yeah.
I mean, a very loving group, and you seem to be having a lot of fun.
And I was raised by very strict right-wing Protestants, Dutch Calvinists from the Midwest, Holland, Michigan, and the designers of apartheid, thank you. And we were just standing there frozen, the frozen chosen. And this is just loosey-goosey.
Savitri, what have you gotten out of the experiment? What have you learned from the experiment?
I think I'm aware that people really need a place to where they're given permission to explore their feelings about what's happening in the world, number one. I also think that it's a lot of young people especially are averse to religion and what religion means and the institutions of religion, and for lots of good reasons, you know, but also are missing that in their lives, what a community can be, what fellowship is, what gathering around your values can be. So I've learned a bit about that, like watching that happen and watching who comes in and who keeps coming back, and that people really actually want to sit in a room together and think about what's happening, you know, and that it's a very diverse group of people.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting because, you know, increasingly, you know, we're self-segregating, the culture is segregating us, you know, always. Social media segregates us in other ways, you know, so to find these places where we are integrated, and then also to integrate our beliefs and our values with our actions, like that's is very exciting to me, because we really do have to start culture over. Like, it's not working.
Yeah.
And where do we start? Well, we start with each other. We don't start alone, that's for sure. We start together. And I just believe in the resilience of diverse ecologies, so that includes humans. And I feel like being at Earth Church has been a real lesson in that resilience.
How is Billy Talon different from Reverend Billy?
I'm afraid that the two characters have blended into each other over time. And I can preach in the kitchen, and Savitri will calm me down, take me off that pulpit, and we can have a regular meal together.
Okay.
But I can start shouting Earth Hallelujah at any moment. Oh! Earth Hallelujah, people!
I'm afraid we're out of time. I want to thank the Reverend Billy Talon, also known as Reverend Billy, and Savitri D., co-founders and directors of the Earth Church, for joining me today. To learn about our incoming shows, you can follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter, at 1-to-1 CUNY TV. And you can now watch the show on the go by downloading the CUNY TV app. For the City University of New York and 1-to-1, I'm Cheryl McCarthy.